the course of a history of political thought is four parts: antiquity and Middle Ages. Then you have the social contract years, and then we enter mature modernity. We're in mature modernity. Mature modernity, so the ideas of the Enlightenment and the results of the Enlightenment, of the social contract theories, which are two major political revolutions: French Revolution and American Revolution, in which new ideas that we still nowadays have become reality. A state which is the result of a social contract between the people and the government, the idea that sovereignty belongs to the people, the idea that people are equal. They are born equal, so they must have equal rights, so they must be equal citizens. The declarations of the right of the man and of the citizen, the idea of human rights, the idea of citizen rights, which are the civil rights and the political rights. So what are the civil rights? What are the civil rights? Sabrina, what are the civil rights?
Civil rights like social rights?
No, civil rights are civil rights.
Right.
No. No.
Right to life?
If you want, but it's not. Like, let's say, civil rights.
Right to speech?
Yes, right to speech.
Right to expression? Property?
Freedom,
Yeah.
life, right to have
Isn't it all of the freedoms according to law? So would be freedom of religion, freedom of speech.
Yeah, these are civil rights. Yeah.
So this-
Yeah, but there is one civil right that is more important than the others. Daniel.
Right to vote?
This is not civil rights. This is not civil rights. What's your name again? Yeah.
Simona.
Simona, you got 30 cum laude, so you must know what is the most important civil right.
Equality.
Equality in which sense?
Well, so we say equality before the law, but in the socialist.
Equality in front of the law. Equality in front of the law. We are all equal in front of the law. This means if you commit a crime, either you're super rich and you're a billionaire and you're very important, you're the chief of government. If you steal, you must go in front of the court and they have the same laws applies to you as the last deprived, bump in the middle of the street. Civil equality, civil rights. This is civil rights, civil rights. This is why when you see movements for civil rights means movements against discrimination, like against apartheid. In the countries like in the United States in the 20th century, you didn't have civil rights equals the same for everybody because the so-called Negroes, so the Afro-Americans, they didn't have the same rights as the white people. The same happened in South Africa with the apartheid, and right now, nowadays, we have this civil rights movement of LGBT people who say, yeah, we want the same rights because we want to be married, we want to have the right to marriage, so we want to be equal in front of the law. And then, yeah, of course, you have the right to speech. But let's say, for example, if you say freedom of speech, freedom of religion, they are civil rights. But right now, we consider these rights, the freedom of speech, the right to life, the right to believe in the God that you want. We consider these as not civil rights, but
Social?
no.
Cultural?
Who said that? Who was?
Human rights.
No. Who said that?
Back.
Human rights. This means, let's go again about the rights. So rights, we have legal rights and human rights. Human rights are linked to the fact that you're a human being, that as a species, as an animal, you're a human. So since you're a human, we believed as Western civilization that you should be granted human rights, which independently under the country you live. So we think that human rights should be respected everywhere, independently from the country. And we put the United Nations to guarantee human rights. You have international courts of justice to protect human rights. like the idea that your life, right to life. The state cannot kill you, cannot touch your life, unless you have that penalty and a fair trial. Right to life, right to speech, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. You can believe in the God you want. These are human rights. We think you have this right because you're a human being, and Western civilization is all about protecting and defending and spreading human rights all over the world. Okay? Civil rights and human rights somehow overlap because we say that the right to have a fair trial is crucial. So, for example, right now we say, Russia is bad, is doing war on Ukraine, and is very bad, but it's also the fact that it's bad, we see it because it doesn't respect human rights. Why? Because if you're an opposition, they put you in jail without a fair trial. Like Alexei Navalny, he was the opposition, they found a way to make a process, to make him in jail, and to kill him. Right? Or, I don't know, Anna Politkovskaya, they put the poison there. Right? So, we think that states must respect human rights, and somehow they overlap, human rights and civil rights. So, human rights, because you're a human being. Then you have the legal rights, who are civil rights, political rights, and social rights, we say. Civil rights, you're all equal in front of the law. Then we have the second kind of rights, are the rights. What is the second kind of rights you mentioned already before? Political rights. The right to vote. This is to have, positive freedom, to only obey to the laws that you have contributed to create. So political rights. Right to vote, the legislative power. This is what makes a state a democratic state, that people have political rights, that they elect their representatives. Okay, this is what we call democracy in Western countries. Then, at the final conference, we will discuss if this is correct or incorrect. So the political rights, you vote and you have a choice. You don't have only one party. You have more parties. And you can vote for your representative, but you can also candidate as a representative, and they're not gonna kill you. So this is what we call democracy, political rights. Liberalism, civil rights. Democracy, civil rights plus political rights, very important. So these is the things. We have the French Revolution, we have the American Revolution, French Revolution and American Revolution. They established civil rights, political rights, equal for everybody. They say all men are born equal and they have to be equal citizens with equal rights. Okay, so this is what happened. 19th century, we also have another revolution, which is not a political revolution, it's a social revolution. The Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution, it happened in this new context. We have equality and so on, civil rights, political rights, but the Industrial Revolution creates new social inequalities. Because with the Industrial Revolution, you can create a huge amount of wealth, a lot of money. You can make a lot of money, you can make a lot of wealth, because you apply energy to producing goods, so you can produce much more goods than in the past. These goods becomes commodities because you trade them all over the nation, all over the world, through new means of transportations like boats or have engines like the trains. So you have this huge growth of wealth, but you also have a new form of poverty. The new forms of poverty of the people who go to work in factories. This new class, the industrial class, the working class, the proletariat, people who goes in work in the manufacturing cities and they really have zero property and they can only sell their workforce and get a salary in exchange, but this salary is barely enough to pay your rent and the food for your family, and you cannot very much survive very well. So socialism is the political theory who say we have to focus on these social inequalities. Yeah, it's good to have equal legal rights. It's good to have equal political rights, but what about the rights in society? What about the rights in society? If you're poor and you cannot afford to be alive through healthcare, to pay for your doctor, if you have political rights but you're illiterate and really don't know how to do it, you cannot exercise these rights. The Declaration of the Human Rights, the French Revolution, the Industrial Revolution say we all born equal, but then we see that in reality, meaning in society, we do not have this equality. We're so unequal because private property is so different and we see people living in extreme poverty. So socialism is about saying you liberal, you Democrats only focus on the law, on the state. We socialists focus on society and introduce a new third kind of rights, which are right now, yes, social rights, social rights. Social right to education, social right to healthcare, social rights in terms of labor rights, you know. You cannot work more than 8 hours per day. You have the right to a pension for upon retirement. When you're too old, you must have the money to survive, otherwise you're gonna die, and this is sad. You know, you have 1 day per week, you can rest, you need a salary which is a decent salary which allows you to survive. Social rights, rights to belong to the social sphere. So you have civil rights, which are legal rights, belong to the law, equality in front of the law. Political rights is the sphere of politics, voting and being voted. Social rights are the rights in society that promotes, you know, more equality in society. So socialism, social rights. Easy. Socialist society, social rights. Easy, you can't be wrong. Okay? The most important thinker is Karl Marx. Karl Marx, philosopher, but mostly a revolutionary person. He always fought for revolution. So, what are the points in Karl Marx that you have to remind? First, Marx is a completely new era of political thought. Because first you say, yeah, all the people before me, Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, and blah, 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 they focused on the social contract, sovereignty, and the state. I focus on society. I focus on society. And so this he calls it materialism, because instead of looking at the abstract thing, is materialist. So he wants to be a realist, Karl Marx. He wants to be a realist. So yeah, he wants to think about the ideal society, which is communism, but to build the idealist society only wants to look at reality. It's not like utopian socialism or say, yes, society should be like this. No, he said, to build a future society, I have to look at capitalism. To build communism, I have to develop a critique of capitalism. So, he said materialism. Materialism, looking at society, looking at things as they are, and so he starts to say, I want to do a historical materialism, a history of societies. And so he analyzed the history of society instead of looking at the political institution, at the republic, at the democracy, and he looked at society. And he came up with this idea, which is the first line of the manifesto of the Communist Party. All society, the history of all society that have existed in human history is a history of class struggles. So he's saying if you look at society, society is divided in classes. And there is a ruling class, and the political institutions are just the representation of these ruling classes. So he said, when the aristocracy was the predominant classes, then the government was absolute monarchy based on aristocracy. When the bourgeoisie made the French Revolution, they changed it with the modern state, but the modern state only makes the interest of the rich people. The modern state is only done to protect private property. The foundation of the modern state is the protection of private property, because this Political system is the representation of the ruling class, which is the bourgeoisie. So this is a theory of how history changes. So it says, you know, ancient Rome, you had the conflict between patricians and plebeians. And when this conflict started to explode, you have the collapse of the Roman Empire. Then you have the feudal system. Then you have the slaves against the masters. Then you have the aristocracy against the bourgeoisie. And when something explodes, you pass from one society to another. So he said the bourgeoisie made the capitalist system. The capitalist system is based on the dominion of the bourgeois, domination of the bourgeoisie, of the capitalists. But his theory, he makes a theory of how it will change again in the future. So what he says is, right now capitalists dominate society, but capitalism needs labor to produce commodities. So it needs to increase and increase and increase and increase the working class. But the working class has different interests. It's not that capitalism is not the best system for the working class. So the most capitalism grow, the most it will become in contradiction with the working class which is growing, and so we will pass from capitalism to the next era of human history, which will be the first society without classes, because it will be based on equality, on social equality, not on political equality or civil equality. It will be based on real social equality, no classes anymore. And it will become communism because private property will be abolished and most things will be in common. Will be in common. You know? Will be in common. Then what is it? How do we go there? It's somehow a thing that results from the development of capitalism, so somehow is within the system, is within the history, but at the same time you need a subjective, active part of the working class to make the revolution. So he said we have to make a revolution of the working class make a revolution against capitalism, and we go from capitalist society to socialism, to communism. So what he wrote also is the fact that in this transition, so you abolish capitalist society, and in the middle you have to make a transition towards a communist society. This transition, he called it the dittatura del proletariato, proletariat dictatorship. Now, they took it too serious because, like, for example, Lenin, Stalin, and so on, they stayed at the moment of the dictatorship. And most socialist countries stayed at the moment of the dictatorship. But the idea of Marx communism is something which things are in common and the state slowly fade, and then and the division of labor is not existing anymore. So for one part of your life you do intellectual labor, for one part of your life you do material labor, and so on and so forth. So he had this idea of communism, which he never developed so much, because he's saying, I'm not an utopist, I'm a realist. So I say, yeah, just communism, blah, 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 but he never described exactly how this was done. So what we see in the history of socialism is rather the fact that they preserved the state, they took the state and they put all the economy in the hands of the state. So we call it state socialism, or real socialism. So we have the idea of Marx, socialism, Marxism, communism, and then we have the historical representations of this idea, which we call real socialism, which we call state socialism. This is what happened. Why this happened? Why do we have this historical representation of the idea of Marx? Why? Because one guy took a train from Switzerland to Moscow one day, right moment, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, Virtue and Fortune. So he wrote a lot of Machiavelli. You know, he was also a very realist politician. He made the right, you know, alliances with the right people and so on. And he also looked a lot at Robespierre and at the French Revolution. So, what is this problem? He was also pretty good in, you know, making theories. So, he was pretty good in reading. He read Marx very, 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 very well. And he realized that he had a big, big problem. So, the point in his career, he wrote many books, The Friends of the People. So, this is because in Russia you had populists. Populists were also wanted to make a revolution, but they wanted to make a revolution centered on the obscena. Obscena, how do you say obscena? Do you know this concept? Obscena. What is obscena? A unity of what? A community. Yeah, exactly. So populists wanted to make a revolution based on obscena. So the agricultural communities in which things were kind of in common, you know. So he wanted to make a small community in which you had kind of socialism. So this was the Russian populists. They say, yeah, we have to establish a socialism based on this small community of obscena and so on. Lenin said, no, look, I'm Marxist. So these obscena things, these old things, we have to go in the direction of economic development, industrial development, and we have to establish, you know, a different thing. So first he wrote against populists. Then he wrote this book, The Development of Capitalism in Russia. In this book he says, we in Russia, we have to make industrial development, to make socialism, because socialism is the power to the working class who works in the factory, to the proletariat. So he was, you know, kind of Marxist. Then he wrote materialism and empiriocriticism, very, very, very developed, you know, theory of how you think through Marxist ideas, what is empirical materialism, historical materialism, and so on. He also wrote this book on imperialism, in which he described the fact that a capitalist nation needs to expand to the global world, needs to make new empires based on exchange, based on capitalist accumulation. And so they must become global somehow. But the problem that he had is that at a certain moment he understood that Russia was ready for making a revolution. Was ready because people were pretty angry, you know, they already tried, they tried a lot of coups, there was terrorist group who were acting against the Tsar, they tried to kill the Tsar already in 1904. So he felt that Russia was ready for the revolution. And so he faced this contradiction. He faced this contradiction of saying, yeah, we are ready for the revolution, but according to my ideas, I'm Marxist, we're not ready for the revolution because it was still a peasant country. It didn't have industrialization. It didn't have industries. It didn't have a lot of industries. So what should we do? And at the end, they decided, no, we make the revolution. You know, it was in this ground. It was Machiavellian. It was Jacobin. It was like Robespierre. He said, okay, I'm gonna go. He put this party, Bolsheviks, which was a minority party. It was a small group of people, but they were very well prepared, very well determined, and they made the revolution through politics. It was in contradiction with Marxism, because Marxism said, yeah, revolution must come through a social movement, economic development, and so on. But he took really politics for serious, and he made this revolution. And he wrote this book. In the year of the revolution, he wrote The State and Revolution, 1917, same year when they did the Russian Revolution. He wrote this book, The State and Revolution. This book was about the fact that revolution in the medium term must abolish the state. How? You have to make Soviets. Soviets, it's the fact that you have to develop the country by building factories, by building, a proper industrial system, and the industrial system must be ruled by the Soviets. The Soviets is the community of the worker, with all the workers within the factory who govern the production, is the community of the workers in the village, in the city, who govern the city. So it's kind of say, democracy is direct democracy exercised not at a political level but at a social level through this group of workers, this assembly of Soviets who exercise kind of direct democracy. So he said the state should be abolished. But then, as we know, they never abolished the state because they in reality, they took all the power into the state and they become a dictatorship. So this is what we have to remember about socialism, Karl Marx, and Lenin. So now we are almost ready. To go to the last part of the course, which is the 20th century, contemporary world, and so on. Before making this, we have to get back to the other big ideology, which is the main ideology of Western countries and which is very much opposed against socialism. So what is this ideology which is very much opposed? We have socialism, and what do we have against socialism? Liberalism. So we make a few more points about liberalism. We're gonna see a kind of liberals who were living at the same times of Marx in the 19th century and who tried to adapt liberalism to the industrial revolution. And these two are one, we take a British guy, John Stuart Mill, and one, we took a French guy, Alexis de Tocqueville. So I guess we have two presentations of these two guys, right? Right.
But they're not here today.
But they're not here today.
And they said that they told you about it, and you said that next week they probably will present on Monday.
Yeah,
I guess they're not here. Yeah.
yeah. I say that,
They're two Italian girls.
yeah, very bad. Okay. So on Monday we're gonna get these two presentations on these people. So let's go through these two people. Let's go through liberalism again. Liberalism. We already introduced through John Locke and through the American Revolution. So let's remember it again. What is liberalism? Liberalism is the very foundation of Western politics. In Western politics you have different ideas, but liberalism is more or less present everywhere, at least so far. Right now we have fascists taking power everywhere, so I don't know. But for all the years after World War II, these were the basic foundations of Western civilization, of all the countries who are in the European Union, in the NATO, and so on. So individualism. The centerpiece of liberal theory is the individual, who is assumed to be rational and self-interested. The individual is the building block of society. So liberalism is very much centered on the individual. The individual has rights prior to entering into society. We remind, John Locke about this idea of natural rights. And thus so, he wants to protect these rights. So the community is a collection of individuals. This is liberalism. Liberalism is based on individual and on individual rights. This is why if you look at liberal institutions, they focus very much on civil rights. They want to have very good courts. They want to have very good courts. They want to have international courts, local courts. They want courts to act very well because they protect rights. So the judiciary system for the individuals, protecting the individuals through a good and fair judiciary system is crucial for liberalism. It's more important than the assembly, than the parliament, than the right to participate and so on. So politics is viewed as instrumental. For liberalism, politics should be reduced because a person is happy when he has the freedom outside of the state, when he can do whatever he wants. And the state is a limitation because he makes law, it say, this you cannot do, this you cannot do, this you cannot do, this you cannot do. So this is the point. So politics is used as instrumental. So it's seen as a means, not as an end. As Simona said, you said Simona, right? Yeah. It's seen as a means to advance interests beyond itself, rather than as an end in itself, undertaken as a means to advance these interests. So, why? Because, as you said, liberalism is based on the idea of negative freedom. Negative freedom. I asked you, Sabrina, this question. How did you answer?
I said, the individual is free to do whatever it wants, anything that's outside of the law.
Yeah. So that freedom begins when law ends. So negative freedom means you're free when there is an absence of coercive interference by other people and by the state. So you're free when you don't have the state to control you, when you don't have the police crimes and say, you cannot do this. So we have, this is why you have to reduce the state to the minimum. Because the more you make the government bigger, the less freedom you have. This is the idea in the United States of America, for example. The United States of America, they understand that not having health care for everybody is a bad thing. That saying, if you go to the United States, you see people dying literally dying in the streets because they are sick and they don't have health insurance. But still, Americans, they're very liberal, they're based on liberalism, and so they say, yeah, but to make healthcare, what do you have to do? You have to make a state system, administration, you have to make a bureaucracy that enforce taxation, and that bring this taxation to enforce healthcare, and then you have to build a structure of the state to make healthcare, and then you have to regulate this and to regulate this, and then you have to make people pay taxes and so on. So your freedom is, damaged by the growth of this state system. So we prefer to have people dying in the streets rather than making the state bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Because we see that freedom, we want to be free, and we think that freedom starts when there is not, the state. So there is also, we see that in the 19th century, liberalism becomes very much.
Can you explain the second concept again?
Politics is viewed as instrumental. So, politics. So, you have individuals. The individuals are crucial, okay? And the individuals have their rights, okay? And these rights are crucial. What is politics? Politics is just an instrument to make this right respected. So, it's an instrument that grants you to have courts that protect your rights, to have judiciary system that protects your right, to have a police that enforces the protection of your rights. Meaning that if you have a right to property, to enjoy your property, the state must be the instrument to set up the police who protect your property, and if you come to steal my property, the police comes and beat you and put you in jail, right? So it's an instrument to protect your individual rights, to freedom, to life, to private property. Private property. So this is why, since we consider private property to be a crucial civil right, in the 19th century, liberalism becomes very much intertwined with capitalism. This has many different reasons. But let's say, for example, this state, according to liberalism, must be smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So you want to reduce legislation, you want to reduce the government, you want to reduce state intervention. When you have a free space, we all know that, capitalism arrives. When there is possibility of profits, capitalism arrives. So when you don't have the state to say, make a limitation, for sure everything is gonna be, they're gonna try to make, some kind of commodity. We made this example yesterday, like social media. Social media is the commodification of human relation between people, is the commodification of human emotions, you know, because you use social media to express your emotion, you know, maybe, you know, to get in touch with a girl you like and so on, but whilst you're trying to express your emotions, the algorithm takes your emotions and put it in the market and sell your profile to a company who want to sell something which is related to this emotion that you're expressing, right? So, or you fear to die, so you go on Google and you look for, you know, these symptoms of this deadly disease, and then Google sells this your emotions to a company who's gonna target you with targeted advertising. So we understand that capitalism really enters everywhere it can. Really, the goal of capitalism, the point of capitalism is to make commodities, to produce commodities, and to make new things and new things to become commodities that can exchange and that can make profit. So liberalism say, let's make the state smaller, let's make less legislation, but when there is absence of legislation, there is capitalism. And for liberals, capitalism is a good way, you know, to express your own capacities. For liberalism, is inequality is good because, you know, you see that other people have more, so this is a motivation for you to do more, So liberalism really doesn't care about inequality. Say inequality is good because it gives you motivation to improve, and capitalism is a good system to make it work. Because capitalism, you know, there is no prejudice. It's not that you're there because you're an aristocrat. No, everybody can get a lot of property. You know, the American dream. If you work hard and blah, 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 you can become billionaire. So this is liberalism is intertwining with capitalism. They think it's a good system to make inequality work in a good way. You have to guarantee equal opportunities, means there is no aristocracy, means you don't have adults. They say, yeah, when you have state structures, what happened is that you have corruption. So people put their friend, their cousin, their wife, their daughter instead of putting the best one. Instead, market competition really is more efficient because put the best thing in charge. Money is democratic because money doesn't look if you were born aristocrat or if your father is important. Money is money. It's competition and goes where the best things are. So we have an intertwine between liberalism and capitalism. So we're gonna look at two thinkers of this. So let's start with Alexis de Tocqueville. Let's start with Alexis de Tocqueville first. Alexis de Tocqueville thinks of democracy exactly like Sabrina. Yeah. Okay. Alexis de Tocqueville. So, Sabrina, what did you say about democracy?
I actually did some research and I found a word that actually matches my thoughts. It's called meritocracy.
Meritocracy.
It's like only the best should rule for general interest. Like not anyone should be able to run for president or run for office because he can rule with the desire of just opinion, not knowledge. So.
Yeah. Basically, this is the idea of meritocracy. No, the idea of meritocracy is kind of an evolution, democratic evolution of the idea of aristocracy. So you should give the opportunity to people to express their capacities. And those who have the best capacity should rule. So the merit, you deserve it. You deserve to rule. This is liberalism. This is also capitalism. You know, you deserve, you go in the market, you risk your life, you put yourself at risk, you show that you're a genius, you work 24 hours per day, and then you get the result because you had the merit. You're lazy, you deserve to be in the street, dying of hunger. Liberalism. Okay? So what we're gonna try to understand with this guy, Alexis de Tocqueville, is the fact that even though we often think as liberalism and democracy, liberal democracy as intertwined, they have points of opposition. They're different. Democracy is about equality. Liberalism is about merit, individual capacity, freedom. Democracy is about equality, liberalism is about liberty. So, this guy, Alexis de Tocqueville, we use it to see a little bit the liberal critique of democracy. So, let's see the story. He lived like pretty much contemporary to Karl Marx. Also, this guy, all the 19th century, okay? So, he was born aristocrat. He was, very elegant, very cultivated, very good language, very aristocratic guy. Very aristocratic guy. So he had to go through the French Revolution. But since he was smart, he said, yeah, it's right, we have to make this revolution. You have to make this revolution. He didn't like that much, but he said, yeah, for century we had aristocracy, but right now we have to make civil equality for everybody. So he even supported the revolution. But what they did, the revolution, then we have the terror, we have Robespierre, so they killed those with family, the revolution. So he got a bit traumatized because he said, I'm supporting civil equality, but then you make the revolution, I support the revolution, you killed all my family just because we're aristocrats. That's not good. So, blah, blah, blah. What happened in 19th century France, after the Restoration and so on, he became a magistrate of the state. He worked for the government. And the government sent him to the United States of America because the government wanted to rethink, prison. Because in France at that time you still had, physical punishment. You break the law, we beat you in the street, we cut your hand and blah, blah, blah. Whilst in the United States, they already created a modern prison system, which is just, we take you and we put in a jail, in jail, for a certain amount of time, depending on what you did. So, they said, okay, Alexis de Tocqueville, you go to the United States and you tell us about this prison system. So he went to the United States and he wrote a very, very, very important book. Democracy in America. Because the United States were a new country in which you don't have the aristocracy, in which you don't have the centuries of traditions in which you get social stratification, in which you have the aristocracy, the nobles, all the tradition. No, in America they started from scratch a society based on equality. So what he says is, I'm going to the new world, I'm going to the United States of America, and I can see how democracy works. And he was kind of fascinated, but he was kind of also scared. Why? Because he said democracy is, instead of putting the better people, you just go to leveraging. The majority is gonna rule, so it's the tyranny of majority, and the majority usually is uneducated people, is not very cultivated people. So we invented this idea of the tyranny of majority as the risk of democracy. So it's the liberal critique of democracy. So he went to the United States and he wrote, among the novel objects that attracted my attention during my stay in the United States, nothing struck me more forcibly than the general equality of conditions. So he came from France, In France you still have this stratification coming from centuries and centuries and centuries of division between the aristocrats, the clergy, the monarch, and the rest of the world. Even if you go nowadays, you see that France has some kind of social stratification, which is the result of centuries and centuries and centuries and centuries of social division. If you go in the center of Paris, you see, or even in Versailles, you see that the most beautiful places, which are centuries and centuries old, becomes to the heir of aristocratic families. He goes there and you see, in the United States, no, you had only people who flee. The United Kingdom started from this general condition of equality. And they say, I discovered the prodigious influence which this primary fact, the force of equality, exercises on the whole course of society, by giving a certain tenor to the laws, by imparting new maxims to govern powers and peculiar habits to be governed. So, Tocqueville recognized that America was unique in the world because it never had a monarchy or a feudal system or an established church or other privileged classes. So there was not these conditions, you know, and there was a lot of land which made American democracy possible. It was one great agrarian middle class, and you know, there was extreme of wealth and poverty, but you know, there was a system of equality. What is most important for democracy is not the great fortune should not exist, but that great fortune should not remain in the same hands. In the same hands. So you can become rich. But the point is, as I said, he developed a liberal critique of democracy by saying the tyranny of the majority. So he said in democracy you have this tendency to create tyranny, and the tyranny is the tyranny of the majority of the population, because the majority in a democracy everybody can vote, so the majority set the standards, and you have to comply with the standards created by the majority. You know, it's the middleman who rule. We have also always to adapt to the middleman who rules. So it's clear that he came from aristocracy, so he liked more an aristocratic system in which you have the best people who are free to express their being best, their better capacities. So in the French Revolution, now with the guillotine, now the reign of terror, it was an expression of this tyranny of the majority. So this is. He said, in the United States, the majority undertakes to supply a multitude of ready-made opinions for the use of individuals, who are thus relieved from the necessity of forming their own opinion. So yeah, there is the majority who rules, you know. You said this, the majority of people, you know, try to make opinions, a general way of thinking, and it imposes as a kind of tyranny, you know. There is this way of thinking of the majority of the population, so you have the television who, you know, transmit this way of thinking, this way of reasoning, and all the people take this way of reasoning, and so you have to adapt. Even if it's shit, you have to adapt to the general level of thinking, which is very, 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 very low level. I see clearly two tendencies in equality. One turns each man's attention to new thoughts, while the other will induce him to freely give up thinking at all. At all, give up thinking. You don't need to think anymore. There is already the opinion of the majority. The human spirit might bind itself in tight fetters to general will to the greatest number. You have to adapt to the general will of the greatest number. This is, you know, Rousseau thought that you have to give sovereignty to the people and express the general will of the population and follow the general will of the population. This is the major rule of democracy. He said the general will can really suck, because can be shit, because the majority is not the best, it's not aristocracy, it's the majority of population who probably is uneducated. If democratic people substituted the absolute power of a majority for all the various power that are used excessively to impede or hold back the upsurge of individual thought, the evil itself would have only changed its form. So he said, we saw the evil in the absolute monarchy, but the general will of the majority can become the new absolute monarch. The new absolute monarch, because if you have just, you know, you vote a majority make a decision, and all the minority have to adapt to this decision. Where is the space for the individuals, for the individual thought? You see, liberalism is about the fact that you want to preserve the individual, and democracy is about the fact that you want to promote the people. He didn't like, you know, the idea that the people should rule, because the people can have bad idea. Common people are easily swayed by strong leaders who mislead the masses, leading to tyranny or despotism. So it's already that within the democratic dynamics, there is already the risk of despotism. He said the aristocracy, at least it was a class of people who elevate property, privilege, who protect against these tendencies. So once the aristocracy is overcome through democracy, there is nothing that can stop despotism from destroying individual liberties. So what is said basically, this is the liberal critique to democracy. You agree, right, Sabrina? Yeah, she's very top brilliant. So the point is saying the only way you can do it, and what he liked in the United States of America, and that this was also a republic. So a republic is based on participation. So he saw that in American democracy there was a lot of participation, and participation of civil society for him could prevent the generation of democracy into a tyranny of the majority. But what he saw clearly that a pure democratic dynamic in which you have individuals isolated can bring you to despotism. Because you have, the individuals, and then you have these strong leaders who try to adapt their words to the basic needs of the population, which are the worst needs. So, the worst needs, like Hitler did. Hitler felt that in his population everybody hated Jews, and he said, yeah, Jews are shit, we're gonna kill all of them, yeah, let's go. And so they, it's not that Hitler, tyrant, but he was democratically elected by the majority of the German population. So what he saw, Tocqueville, is, this is the point. You have, the general will of the people can be the worst, can be say, our problem is migrant people, let's kill them all. And the leader is gonna take this exact opinion and follow this opinion in order to get elected, and then he got elected, but this is a kind of tyrant. So for now, we stop here, so we have developed more the liberal idea, and we have midterm exam again, where nobody wants to come. Yeah. Serena, no, Allegra. Serena, Allegra